So if we're looking for an individual, we'll go to the party part of the navigation bar, and we're going to do Find a Party. This brings up a search window. A lot of options here. Some you're not going to use. We're not going to go into detail except in the most important ones. Obviously, the most important one is the name. You're going to put the last name here. You can also use just part of the last name and use a wildcard character, which is an asterisk at the end, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. You can add the first and middle name if you need to, or if you feel like you have it and if it's accurate. You're going to probably find that your best search option is simply put in the last name and hit enter and scroll through till you find what's necessary. There's also a way to search by phone number if that phone number is stored in the system. And the beginning of the Orion conversion, there's probably no phone number stored here. You'll actually see a place where you can put that in if you need to. The other search option is owner ID. That's a system assigned number that you will probably begin to use more and more as we go through the system and through the appraisal and getting things set up. And that may be a much simpler ID number to reference with a taxpayer, say on a valuation notice. Legacy ID is not used. Okay. You can also search by address. This can be very efficient or very inefficient depending how well your property addresses, your situs address is set up on Camera before you convert to Orion. We're not going to get into that very much, but you do have standard address options and non-standard where you can put in street address, street name, etc. You'll have to look at your own system and how well you have that set up to see how efficient that actually is. For the time being, we're going to concentrate strictly on name. Now I'm going to look up the name of an individual who's a friend of mine. We're going to do it first, just putting in his first three letters of his last name and a wildcard character. The wildcard character again is the asterisk, and you can either hit search or you can actually just hit enter. Alright, now this brings up every name that begins with MAS. You'll also see the very first name up here is not the first name on the ownership record, but it is the second one. So any name that's stored in that ownership record can be searched upon, even if it's not the first name. That's another advantage of Orion. This is too big of a search field. There's 26 records down here. I don't want to search through all 26 of them. Let's go back and we'll just refine that search. And instead of just putting the first three letters of his name in, we're going to put his full name, or full last name. And again, you can hit enter or search. Now we've limited that down to 11 records. The person I'm looking for is John Masoni. And we see that there's two records here associated with John D. Masoni. One is a trust and one is just John D. Masoni. As they are separate ownerships here, two party records. Now, you'll also notice over here on the side that there is an owner ID associated with that name. So if you want to do a quick reference back to John D. Masoni at some point, you can punch in 1169. Or if John D. Masoni calls in one day appealing his value and he has his valuation notice in hand, that owner ID is a much easier number to sort and find by than a full parcel ID. Shows that under the name John D. Masoni there is one property owned, and this is the address associated, the mailing address associated with that. This property is also owned by John D. Masoni, but as a trust with others, there's one property owned. I happen to know that one I'm looking for would be this one. Click on his name. It brings up his name, address, what we just saw. If there's any additional information, additional lookup names, additional owners, you can put phone numbers in if you want to at this point. You can put email addresses in if you want to at this point. Parcel number is currently associated with a comment here. Mailing name is not something we're going to deal with at this point. And now let's say we want to see what property is actually associated with this name John D. Masoni. So we can simply click on properties. We won't get into documents at this point. Here's one property associated with John D. Masoni. You have a legal description here, what taxing unit it's in, whether there's any exemption status on it, and the reference number for the property That's the quick reference number that's assigned in addition to the parcel number. Now, from this point, you can navigate to the property record and do your search, find whatever you need to know about that property. Okay. Now, let's go back to find the party. Just type in the same name again. I want to make you aware of something else. You'll notice that some of the first records here appear to be the same individual. There's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 records here under the name Daniel, or Daniel D, or Daniel David Etux, or with wife's name. As you go through and look at these, you recognize that there are some differences that should be there. The first record is actually a trust. The second record is Daniel D and Pamela Masoni. Next one is Daniel D Masoni Etux. Next one is Daniel D Etux Pamela C. And the last one is Daniel David et al. Those other owners, so that should be a separate record. These three records are the same person and persons written in a different manner, which generated 3 property records, which means each one of those would have to be updated if there were an address change. Now, the reasons for the difference is the names are written differently, and in one case, there's also, you'll notice that part of the zip code is missing. That in itself will create a different property record because the system recognizes that as a different party, simply because the zip code is different. You want to do as much cleanup as possible in Camma before you convert to Orion. One of the ways to do that is to download your AA information, particularly your name, mailing address, zip codes, care of owner, to a spreadsheet. Format that spreadsheet in a way as it would appear and upload to Orion, and use that to identify the properties that you need to work on. It's a very efficient method, and even though you may think you have done a lot of cleanup already, if you run this type of report, you're going to find that there's a lot more errors out there, or a lot more discrepancies than what you actually want. It gives you another opportunity to clean that up. If you'd like some help with that, give us a call.